coming to an end of a wonderful day, I'd like to invite, without further ado, James Dearsley. Please take it away.
Thanks very much. I've never, ever been to a conference where the moderator has asked if everyone would like a pinky. That's a first for me, I have to say. I'd like to thank you for all having me. I got here in the nick of time. I haven't slept for 36 hours. I haven't had a shave yet. I brushed my teeth in the disabled toilets behind the back here, having just flown in from Argentina via Madrid, Paris, and finally here. So I'm really relieved that I got here. But I'm sort of come, I was asked to finish this all off, to give you sort of that perspective of PropTech, where it's come from, and hopefully a look at what all of you here in this room can do. Because if I give you one little story from my trip in Argentina, I hope it puts into perspective exactly the potential that you guys all have here in this room. I was invited over by a large global bank to do what they termed a deep dive session, a 5-day workshop with 25 of their heads of innovation, business development directors, and very, very, very senior positions within the bank from all over the globe. Because they recognized what this word, this one little word, PropTech, was doing to their business. They were trying to get ahead of the game. They were sat there for 5 days wargaming what the bank can do to help their clients with their property purchases, rentals, moving, the entire value chain of the home buying process. I was asked to do a small speech for them to give them a sense of size. And we were on the 33rd floor of an beautiful building in central Buenos Aires. And perspective windows all around. And I just asked them, before I said anything, just turn around and have a look outside the window. Buenos Aires has 14 million citizens within it. And the perspective that we had in front of us was just buildings. A complete mixture of residential and commercial buildings. And I said, look, property is the largest asset class in the world. Savills valued it at $217 trillion. I said, and that's one thing. And you as a bank focus on mortgages all the time. But forget that. Just remember, every single one of these buildings we're looking at here has got somebody behind that window. Doesn't matter if it's their home or their office, but PropTech has the potential to impact every single one of them. Young, old, fat, thin, beautiful, ugly. Every single one of those people behind those windows is going to be impacted by this word PropTech. Let's go through it a little bit more. There was a report put out just this year, the first ever academic report. And an anonymous quote came out and said, is PropTech creating a whole new industry, or is it just a more efficient way to create and extract money from a fat dinosaur that's got bad knees and lost its agility? I'm not surprised it was anonymous, but that's what the property industry is perceived to be, the fat dinosaur. Now, I don't tend to agree. I think it's a little bit rude. So I wanted to change it a little bit. To PropTech is a symptom of a wider change in the real estate industry, which I'll come on to a little bit later. And it's creating a more efficient way to help a lost dinosaur regain a sense of direction, and essentially giving them access to a new food source, a new resource that can help them make money in a different way. That's what we're all here to do. Let's look at some of the reasoning as to why PropTech is suddenly becoming such a huge impetus. You may have heard this earlier on. I'm sorry, I was probably somewhere, flying somewhere. But a lot of this has got to do with the investment around this area at the minute. The small bar graphs on here denote the size of investments by venture capitalists around the world. 2016, we saw $2.6 billion of investment made in the PropTech business. Now, that's still small. It's about 1/6 the size of the fintech market, but it's growing quickly. The other interesting thing for me is if you look at the number of deals done, we're showing a level of consistency. On average, around about 60 deals per quarter. The venture capitalists have woken up to PropTech. The really critical thing, which this graph doesn't show, however, most of this investment has been from the US, and in particular, actually, this one quarter with the $1.4 billion from Asia. What they've missed out is Europe. First quarter of this year, as I predicted in December, in fact, Europe was the fastest growing area for real estate investment, real estate tech investment around VCs. It's here, it's woken up. But it's not just investment. Investment is key, and just to sort of add an addendum to that, because I've tried to consolidate this presentation down as much as I can, those investments are actually getting into more mature companies as well, which is an interesting span over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. We've seen this growth from very sort of seed level investment to far more sort of Series A, Series B level. So the investments are getting far more mature. But for me, it's not just about funding. It's about silly little things. This is just Google Trends showing the growth of the term PropTech, ReTech, and CreTech. And it's going to go again here. Now, this was, for me, a sort of a little spite against the US, because the US called it ReTech for many, many years, and it was massively popular. And then suddenly the green line caught them up, and in the September of 2017, PropTech is now the word that most people are using to search. It's important, again, because we're seeing this move across from the US, across into Europe and beyond. PropTech is the term that we're using. Part of the problem is trying to make sense of it. It's trying to understand just how many companies are dealing in it. And there's two sorts of companies that we can start talking about. There's endogenous technology. Technology which is actually impacting the the real estate market itself. This is just a map of PropTech companies in the UK, and there's a lot of maps now coming out across all of the different regions around the world, Nordics included. This is mainly endogenous technology, so software providers impacting the industry directly. We're seeing a lot of online estate agents and property management firms who are just increasing the efficiency of the property market itself. It's a direct impact. You then got the second form of technology, which is going to have a significant impact. That's of the exogenous technologies. This is a table which was put together by a dear friend of ours in the UK, who's the Director of Data at the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, which for me is one of the most important graphs that you can consider. And it plots the X and Y axis around how much you need to know about the tech against whether it's impacting now or has got the future. So for example, you need to understand data considerably and it's impacting today. From his perspective, graphene, 3D printing were very, very considerably important for him because it's in the construction and surveying sectors, but they're quite a long way in the future. We've talked a lot about autonomous cars. Fascinating. For me, truly revolutionary. If you look back in the history books, you'll see how city design is built around our transport infrastructure. Just wait till autonomous cars come in. Incidentally, that Toronto Google thing, they've just put in an application. Hasn't been accepted yet, is my understanding. But that'll be exciting. Why? Because they're talking about building a city from the internet up. It's quite a cool term. Things in here for me that you really need to understand and think about. Big data, Internet of Things we've touched on, robotics, AI, blockchain, machine learning. All of these will be central to how our commercial, residential, retail, construction, house building sectors develop over the next 5 to 10 years. But let's bring it back. What the hell is PropTech? What is it? I was asked in a panel. They said, James, I'm sure you've been asked many, many times what PropTech is. Can you give us a definition? And I realized after being in the industry for 4 or 5 years, I had absolutely no clue. No one had ever asked me what PropTech was. But let me break it down. This was scribbled literally on the back of a notepad at the time. PropTech is one small part of the wider digital transformation of the property industry. I'm not alone. Anthony, who spoke so well earlier on, is also an advocate of this as well. PropTech, it's a symptom. It's not the result. It's not the end game. The end game is digital transformation. We've seen it happen in many industries. The automotive industry, Hollywood's being impacted by Netflix, Amazon's impacting the retail sector. Digital transformation is impacting all sectors. We're just one of the last to be impacted by it. It describes a movement driving a mentality change within the real estate industry and its consumers. Of all of this statement, for me, this understanding it's a mentality shift is actually the most important. It's not just ourselves in this room who are understanding technology can enable different things. It's Mrs. Smith who's wanting to do her online shopping. It's the little girl or boy who wants to interact with Alexa. The consumer mindset is shifting, it's changing, it's developing. That's how PropTech is coming about. Regarding technology-driven innovation, which is obvious, in the data assembly, transacting, and design of buildings and cities. It's all-encompassing. PropTech is not about just Alexa being in the home. It's not about the sensors which will be driving data, giving feedback about how our buildings are in fact feeling. I had a significant discussion, quite a philosophical debate, that at the minute we're not going to be talking about ourselves. You know, we've all got our wireless, Fitbits and giving data back to ourselves. It's only going to be the same about our buildings. Our buildings will be feeding back to ourselves. They will have a heartbeat. They will be able to tell us how they're feeling. It's an incredibly exciting time. But I hope that gives you a bit of an understanding, at least as to what PropTech means. Let me just expand a little bit about this whole mentality shift. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. This is a bit of research that I had the pleasure of working with HSBC on. They surveyed 9,000 people around the world, looking at the home buying process. And it helped, this is a different bank, but it helped them understand more about the purchase journeys that they were going through. Dealing with people was absolutely the most painful point. It wasn't just estate agents. It was mortgage brokers, it was solicitors, it was the entire dealing with people which was causing their problems. That had a huge impact on the bank because they realized that they had to look at different ways of engaging with different sorts of people. What they realized was the fact that whilst the baby boomer generation, 45-year-olds and plus, still wanted to deal with people, there was a general trend from the millennials to be more about this automated movement, which we've already talked about today. In particular, for the bank in this case, chatbots, humanoid advisors, because millennials are an on-demand. They want it now. But the other interesting thing was that whilst the millennials wanted interaction on demand with things like chatbots, who was their most valued group of people, do you think, that they went for their own research? Who do you think they trusted the most, millennials? Anyone got any guess? Friends? Anyone else? Not Google. No, Google wasn't there. Sorry, Google. Anyone else? Friends is one. Yeah. The most surprising one about millennials? For their mortgage advice? Parents. Parents, they can't stand their parents. But it's significant, right? They wanted their research on demand, which is where they wanted this interaction, automated interactions, but when they really wanted to seek the right advice, they went to their parents. Moving into the commercial sector. It's been really fascinating hearing what everyone said about this, but just one statistic which I think backs up everything that's going on in this building itself. This is a statistic from London, looking at co-working, the percentage of co-working take-up since 1984. Hardly anything. Then all of a sudden, 2016, 2017, it's boomed, doubled. Now 15% of office space is taken up by co-working. We've seen a massive, massive boom. It's a mentality shift. Everything that Anthony was just saying there about how people are using space, I can't emphasize how important that is. because it's being driven by the mentality shift of those people starting businesses and developing. And here's just 3 different quotes to back that up. Charlie Green, co-founder of the Office Group, which is a competitor of WeWork. I don't know what space needs are going to be in 12 months, so how can you sign a 12-year lease? Or 10-year lease, is that? 10-year lease. It's true, right? VTS, one of the precursors of the sort of the commercial real estate technology boom when they joined with Hightower about 18 months ago. Most companies are literally thinking about their strategy on a quarterly basis. 5-year business plan? These guys don't know. A UK-centric one here, so apologies on this, but the number of small businesses increased by 17% from 2010 to 2016. Nearly 500,000 new businesses and 38% were founded in London. That is what's fueling this growth in co-working, because they want the flexibility. They want the ability to do what they want, when they want, how they want. They're not going to sign long leases. And the stat which really interested me, looking at the Office Group, and this absolutely hits on the space as a service element. It's not just about WeWork making money of its tenants. It's this. 38% of tenants in the Office Group's co-working offices have done business together. The Office Group's sort of process around that is to say, well, how can we monetize that element? They're not just talking about a lease. They're not just talking about space. They're talking about community. They're building huge, engaged, adaptable communities. Space as a service. Like I said, I get involved a lot with digital transformation. This is something that I just actually think it's quite useful for anybody here who's in a startup or in a larger corporate. This is something which Dr. Mary Lippert produced, which we use an awful lot when trying to engage in these larger corporate property companies, because they simply do not have a clue. They are struggling to work out what the hell is going on. And part of it is they may well have a vision for change, but they don't have the skills. They're struggling to have the right people to implement any plan that they've got. They may have the vision and the skills, but they have no incentives for these teams to do this work. They simply don't have the resource. How do they deal with their staff changing and developing around them when they can't deal with it? And ultimately, they might have all of these, and they don't realize it, and they have no plan in place. To the extent now that a lot of these bigger corporates that we're now starting to deal with, if they haven't got all of these elements in, we can't work with them. Because it just means it's just not going to go. These big companies are managing complex change on a daily basis, and they're struggling to fit all of these different verticals, which will create all of these aspects. It's a very frightening time for them all. But what can you guys do about it? We did a little study for this quarter, looking at exhibitions and associations around Europe. I was very keen because it's exploding around us. And what we've just plotted here, so anywhere we can see a flag, there's an association of sorts, bringing together PropTech companies for the greater good to collaborate, consolidate, learn from each other, all the problems and the issues that they have. Something's needed up in Nordic land. Exhibitions. This was what I was most shocked about. 3 or 4 years ago, there were no exhibitions anywhere. You had to sort of entice people in to come to a little meetup group with 10 people involved. Now, in this quarter, I can't tell you the amount of exhibitions coming up, especially, well, in the Nordics as well. This one is a classic example. They're springing up, they're engaged, they're getting people involved. You have a fantastic opportunity as a community to get together and learn from everything that you're all doing. Definitely, if you haven't spoken to him already, the man with possibly the worst dress sense in the entire world, Magnus, wherever you are, at the back. Sorry, Magnus. Find him. He's doing some cool things. Because, not in his clothing, but in the business environment. But you need people like that. You need to find your influencers in your marketplace and seriously get talking to them. Collaborate and come together. I want to leave you with one point. Bill Gates is often attributed to this quote, but it's wrong. It's a theory called Amara's law, which is we underestimate we overestimate what's going to happen in the next 2 years, and we underestimate what's going to happen in the next 10. You guys, by being in this room today, are so far ahead of everybody else. But don't underestimate what's about to happen. Thanks.